Welcome to episode 4 of the Monochrome Picture Show. Today we'll be talking about the new Irish film on Cailín, or The Quiet Girl in English. Directed by Colin Barade, it is his first feature film. This episode will contain spoilers for the film, so please watch the film and come back and listen to the episode when you're done. To summarise the story, we focus on a young girl named Koch. She grows up in a crowded, somewhat uncaring family. With a father that drinks and gambles too much, and with a mother who is unable to give her attention with another child on the way, she is starved of attention and affection. Over the summer, she is sent to stay in the countryside with her mother's cousin Eileen and her husband Sean, so that she won't be under anyone's feet. Koch begins to blossom under their supervision, though we begin to suspect they are keeping a secret from her. Fun fact about this film: Colin Barade went to the Irish Film and TV Awards expecting to be beaten by Kenneth Branagh's Belfast and said he was simply happy to get nominated. In the end, Barade's film walked away with 8 out of 10 of the awards it was nominated for, including Best Film. And I think it deserves that. I think it was better than Belfast.
Oh, absolutely better than Belfast. Much more heartfelt, honest, genuine.
It felt more genuine.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh,
Not
yes.
to take anything away from Belfast, because I enjoyed it as well, but
Oh, yeah, me too.
it felt like this one really had a heart to it that you just couldn't deny.
Absolutely.
Over the course of this episode, we will begin with a discussion on form, touching on plot, cinematography, and acting before we talk about meaning. So what the story meant to us, what we feel like the director was trying to convey, while also talking about it in terms of its relation to Late Spring, the Yasujiro Ozu film we discussed in the last episode. So to begin, what did you feel like in terms of plot or...
Well, it comes from Foster by Claire Keegan. So I think you can really tell that it comes from a written form, like that it was developed from a written story.
How so?
Because the way the story is constructed and the fact that Foster is actually written in first person, they did manage to keep the point of view in first person, even though there's not necessarily like a narrator's voice and stuff, or the kid's voice, you know what I mean? So I feel they didn't divert too much from the actual short story, short novel rather. It was inspired by...
Well, what I thought was really stunning about the film in particular was the fact that the structure of the plot felt healing, and watching it felt like a healing experience. Like the pacing, the structure, the development of Koch as a character, it felt like there was a quality of the film that transported you into a different realm for a time being, and while you're there you're just totally entranced. And it does feel like you're watching this person heal over the course of 90 minutes. And having said that, it doesn't feel like 90 minutes. It feels far longer. Oh, yeah. Not to say that that's a bad thing at all. It feels like it's just a completely different... It's like Ciúin an Og, which is an Irish folk myth about a different place, a different land where time slows down.
Oh, wow.
And it feels just like that, where time feels different when you're watching the film, especially on the big screen.
I agree. You know, I don't know if necessarily it feels longer, it just feels timeless. Like it could be any time you completely lose yourself in the film, and which doesn't happen very often these days, you know.
It doesn't,
So that makes it really special. I agree with you completely. Actually, I have some things to say about that, but it's not necessarily about the plot. It's more about the director's choices, the editing, and the cinematography. So maybe we can talk about them a little later. Okay. If you have anything else to say about the plot, per se.
Well, one thing I might just say quickly is that part of what makes the film feel timeless, as if time doesn't exist when you're watching the film, is the fact that the plot is so seamless. Not one moment stands out, if that makes sense. There aren't big melodramatic moments in the film. There are touching moments. There are moments that feel especially important. But each scene feels like it's contributing to her as a person and as a little girl who's growing up. It feels like each scene is supremely significant and we get to watch like Braid build these blocks. I think also the fact that there's no music for the majority of the film. I think there's 2 scenes when there's a montage and then at the end that he uses music, and I think that also contributes to the timeless feel.
Yeah, I agree. He also uses not found footage, but pre-existent footage of old Irish television and choirs, like recorded from a TV program, which I find awesome because it's diegetic. So he makes it diegetic, so there's no non-diegetic music, I think. Even if there was, it was so seamless that we both didn't pick up on it.
Yeah.
There's a lovely article from the Irish Times written by Donald Clark. I just wanted to mention that he says a very similar thing. He defines it as a celebration of uncomplicated human kindness, which I think it's on point because it's exactly as you said. There's no big scene. There's no there are plenty of heartbreaking sequences, but they're not planned out to be standing out from the rest, right? Every scene works together with the rest, so there's no hierarchical aspect of filling and important scenes. Every scene is important because every experience of her is important.
In that respect, it didn't feel Hollywoodian at all.
Not at all.
It didn't feel like there was the final catharsis of the character, like being like the dramatic monologue. None of that's present in the film. There isn't a battle with the figure in your life that's holding you back. There was none of that. It was just very organic and very genuine, very real.
Yeah. As we are comparing it to Late Spring, so last week we talked about the essentialist narrative structure of Late Spring, which is a term developed by Kate Geist. I think this term can also be applied as we don't necessarily miss out on events like we did on Late Spring. So we're not missing out on special moments in the kid's life and things like that. But more than anything, we see daily aspects of life that in real life we wouldn't consider as cinematically relevant, I suppose. So this is the essentialist part.
Okay.
But the way the director portrays them gives significance to them in a very almost near-realist way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it was a brilliant film overall.
No, it was. I'm thinking about the plot in relation to Late Spring as well, which there are similarities. I mean, that's actually part of the reason why we wanted to compare these 2 films was, number one, because of the content, which focuses on a girl. On Cailín Ciúin, it focuses on a girl building relationship with a surrogate mother and father. And in Late Spring, it's about a woman actively engaging with her relationship with her father. So we felt there were similarities, but especially in terms of the cinematography, which I think we can talk about now.
Oh yeah.
The cinematography felt very similar, which was ironic actually, because when we got the chance to talk with the director and we were asking him about the visual style of the film, and he said, well, I've been told it looks a little bit like an Ozu film.
Oh yeah.
But I've never seen an Ozu film. And we were sitting there thinking, like, yep, it looks just like Late Spring.
Just like it, yeah. Yeah. I have also something to say about the aspect of domestic space, because it's not only present, but it's fundamental. During the Q&A, the director stated that the house where the majority of the film is set, it's a character by itself. I mean, that's exactly my angle to the discussion, so I love it. And I just wanted to draw the attention back to Banshun when we were talking about the fact that it's a transitional story. The majority of scenes are shot in the house, but always in corridors or alleys or anyway places of passage. And then in The Quiet Girl, the house becomes a character in the sense that the protagonist constantly interacts with the domestic space in several ways. It links quite nicely to phenomenology, I think, and in my opinion, the director made the choice of finding a way for the audience to step back into a childlike point of view of perception. Okay, we're both young adults, so we're not too far away from the realm of childhood. So I still have quite present within myself how it felt to be a kid and interacting with the space around me.
Yeah.
In Cailín,
Mm-hmm.
the house, it's the character with which the protagonist interacts the most. And if we look at it from a point of view of the development of the character, at the beginning of the film, spoiler alert, she hides all the time. She hides in tall grass, and she hides under beds. She doesn't speak. She doesn't interact with her siblings. She hides like in some sort of forest when escaping from school and stuff like that. So she's constantly hiding and not interacting with the outside world. This conveys the fact that within her family, she is never acknowledged her space. Like her physical space in the world. Everybody's ignoring her. They're only looking for her when they want to see if she's still alive. But that's basically what they do. Yes.
Which, interestingly, is what Sean does. Do you remember at the beginning of her stay with Eileen and Sean? Sean isn't especially friendly with her at the beginning.
Oh, yeah.
He's a little bit reserved. He doesn't really entertain the idea of hanging out with her. And then Eileen forces him to spend time with her by sending her off to work with him.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, she's really only there to hang around at his side. And then she disappears. And then Sean takes notice immediately, and he starts looking for her and finds she's still alive, is relieved, but then of course is furious.
Oh, yeah.
Because that always seems to be the case when parents lose their child and then they find them again. It's, oh my god, thank god you're still alive. Also, I'm going to kill you. Don't ever do that to me again.
Yeah. Exactly, but he has some sort of reaction and acknowledges the fact that, okay, I was worried you weren't okay, you are okay, don't do that again. The mom can't find her for 10 minutes. The first sequence of the movie is just them looking for her. Actually, she is just hiding while you can hear out of screen voices of calling her name and stuff like that, saying, Mommy's looking for you, la la. And then when the mother actually finds her, the only thing she says is, you have mud under your shoes.
Yeah.
She wasn't even worried. What is even going on? I love the way they portray the family. It's so dysfunctional in such a common way. It's not violent.
No.
It's not over the top. It's just sad,
uncaring,
bland and uncaring, you know, neglectful. Back to the house, the thing that I wanted to say, I just want to quickly relate it to Gaston Bachelard. He's a French philosopher. He wrote this book, it's called The Poetics of Space. It's amazing. If you want to check it out, I'll leave the link in the description. But he has this amazing definition of the home in terms of its poetics, and he defines it as the topography of our intimate being. Topography being the arrangements of natural and artificial elements within an area, but the area, it's us. So it's basically the representation of our interior landscape. And I love it because with the knowledge of this notion, you then think at the beginning of the film, this child only finds herself comfortable in hidden corners or outside of her house. So her physical right for a space is absolutely neglected. And then when she gets to feel a little more comfortable in Eileen and Sean's house, she starts to interacting with different rooms, and you see, for example, the texture of and the pattern of the wallpaper. There is this really lovely close-up shot. So, for example, the texture of the blanket or the food they're cooking. Anyway, she starts to feel, you know, more comfortable around her environment. And you can tell by the way the environment is shot around her, because the point of view, it's her point of view.
Yeah.
I think that's really
I think
great.
that's an amazing way of looking at it.
I think it's on point, because I think one issue in cinema is the way we portray not kids necessarily, because there's amazing child actors and actresses, but the way directors portray their way of looking at things, and it's often demeaning and a little shallow and a little stereotypical, and also draws a picture that is heavily stereotyped, also a little even a little mockingly so.
Mm.
This is not the case in Cailín Ciúin. The director treats this character with extreme respect for the period in development she is in. That's great.
He does. No, he does. There's no sarcasm in the film. It's probably the best way of describing it.
Mm-hmm.
Every character that is put on screen feels like they are genuine to the extent that it's actually almost painful to watch sometimes, because even sub-characters like Koch's biological father.
Oh, yeah.
And I say biological because over the course of the film it feels like Sean becomes her dad.
Yeah.
We also got the opportunity to speak with Michael Patrick, in the Q&A.
In the Q&A.
He was talking about his approach to portraying her biological father, because he isn't in many scenes. He's in a few scenes in the beginning, and then he appears again at the end.
Mm-hmm.
But his approach to the character brought so many layers to him that it really shows when you're watching the film, because the way that he describes the character afterwards, you immediately think, oh yeah, that's exactly what you were doing. That's exactly who that character was, and you got that just from reading a few lines of dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
He describes him as an island of himself, because he's a character who's lost, who hasn't really found his way in life. In certain ways, takes that out on his family by refusing to speak the Irish language with them and isolates himself completely. And in his description of the character, he brings a whole lot of empathy to this person, which humanizes him.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a character that you don't want to empathize with because he's not a good father.
Absolutely not.
But in his portrayal of him, you realize that actually there is a humanity there, and that's what makes the film feel so real and as if it breathes almost.
Mm-hmm. During the Q&A, he said that his character knows he should do better, but he can't. Something like that. Yeah, I agree with everything you said.
Yeah.
It's a very human portrayal of family environment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
While we're talking about the acting, I'd like to touch on Andrew Bennett's character quickly. So he plays the character of Sean.
Mm-hmm.
I think that he does an amazing job playing Sean. Plays the role so well because he makes this... I mean, if you've lived in Ireland for a long enough time, when you're watching this person on screen, you might even confuse them for... you might even confuse Sean for somebody you know, because he feels that genuine and that real. Bennett brings a charming, quiet stoicism to the character, and he's rough around the edges, and that's apparent from the beginning. But as scenes develop, Bennett brings a charming, quiet stoicism to the character, and at the beginning, it's not very charming. It's more even
hostile. Not even a hostile,
not
but
hostile,
extremely
disinterested.
Disinterested, yeah.
And he's rough around the edges, and that's apparent from the beginning of the story. But over the course of the film, you see that he really does have a good heart, and it comes out in organic ways. It's not melodramatic. There aren't moments where he reveals himself to be a good character, really.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, you see him as a human and as somebody who has these feelings but perhaps struggles to show them because of the life that he's led and the experiences that he's had to live through.
Oh yeah, we get to know that they lost a child. This is the spoiler alert part, I suppose, which frames them then entirely differently.
Particularly Sean.
Particularly him.
Because
exactly.
Eileen we see as a very maternal, loving figure from the beginning.
Yeah.
And she's played very well by Carrie Crawley.
Oh, she's amazing.
And she has this beautiful tenderness to her, where she will get down on her haunches and she'll look into Koch's eyes, and you can just tell that she is a loving person from that moment. Like from the very first interaction, as soon as Koch gets out the car, you feel like you can trust her.
Yeah.
But with Sean, you can see that there is the grief that he can't quite let go of immediately. Like he's not going to hand himself over to Koch at the beginning. And over the course of the film he does, and completely does so at the end, which is absolutely heartbreaking to watch. you know, if you don't cry at the end, I don't know what you're made of. If we were to talk about the meaning behind the film, it is a story about healing and growth, and you see that with both Koch and Sean in particular. Eileen as well, but I feel like the character of Sean has to come over these boundaries that he's put in front of himself. He's put barriers around himself that he doesn't want to cross again. And over the course of the film, you see both Sean and Koch break down each other's boundaries and heal each other, and that's what makes the film so endearing.
It is literally impossible not to cry at the ending.
I think the two of us are welling up as we're talking about it.
I think I definitely am. Oh my god, yes. No, the last sequence, it's so heartbreaking. And I remember one person in the audience asked then the director what happens afterwards, of course, because we all want to know, because we don't get to know if Koch then goes back and lives with them, which we all know she doesn't. No. And that's exactly what the director says. He says, I'm a realist, so she doesn't. She stays with her biologic parents, but the experience that she had with Sean and Eileen will shape her forever.
That's what makes it a bittersweet story, I feel, because you could frame that as a sad ending, but I don't. Number one, I don't think we needed to hear what Beraid had to say about the ending. I think actually the ending is quite apparent, and that's all you need to know from it. Asking for more, I feel, is a little bit unnecessary, but that's just me.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I think the shot of the biological father kind of like rushing over
angrily
them, while Sean and Koch are hugging, and he's angrily walking towards them. That's all you need to know. It's obvious what happens afterwards. Of course, I'm all for happy endings, and I would have loved to see an entire film of her moving in with them permanently, going to school, graduate, whatever, but that's just me. Like, I know life is a little bit different, and most of all, that films need to convey something, so sometimes there's no need for a happy ending just because I want one. You know what I mean?
One thing I might just add as well is that Beraid did an amazing job of matching the story, so the story being about Koch's healing and growth and flourishing under Eileen and Sean, with the structure of the film, because the structure feels like it's a healing process, like it's a wound closing, and he did a really impressive job of marrying those two facets together.
What do you have any specific examples of that?
Well, there's a montage sequence which I think is especially important. So it's the moment when I think she's just arrived at the farm, and following a few days she's very, very on edge, and she looks like a child who probably has come from care. Like, she's very, very reserved, doesn't feel open or confident, and then over the course of the film she begins to open up. And then there's a montage sequence with Eileen brushing her hair and counting to 100, and it's just beautiful. And then that's followed over the course of the film.
Yeah, it's impossible for me not to become a little emotional when I talk about it, because it's such... I remember exactly the scene you're talking about. It's followed by not necessarily a supercut, but I suppose a montage of all the things that they did together.
Oh yeah.
And then twice. They do it twice. So they do it when there's the hair brushing sequence, where you see them cooking together and you see, I don't know, vacuuming the floor. It's all like daily activities, but you feel a grounding of daily habits that she didn't have before, because no one bothered spending time with her. In the last scene, when she's running back to say goodbye to them, while she's running, it cuts to the same montage, just, I think, not necessarily sped up, but maybe slightly shorter. It's just great. The way it's portrayed, it's so simple, linear, Oh, it's beautiful.
It's an amazing film, and
It's
I'm really
amazing.
glad that we got to see it when we did.
I'm so glad that we got to participate with the Q&A as well, because that's just an extra, you know.
Yeah.
Just hearing what the actual creator had to say about it, it's just another level. Yes. Go see it if you haven't
please
seen
do.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Watch it multiple times. Cry your eyes out. Do we have anything else to say concerning Banshun?
I would say that the endings are both bittersweet, which is another way of framing the relation. But Cailín Ciúin feels more optimistic, I would say, whereas Late Spring feels more, not pessimistic, but realistic. It's sad. And even though it was a sadness that was inevitable, it was still heartbreaking to watch. Both of these films are quite heartbreaking.
Oh, yeah.
But they're beautiful because of it, I think.
Yes, I agree. I don't necessarily know which one of the two is more optimistic or pessimistic. I think they're both quite realistic.
Do you think?
Yeah, I think so. Actually, this theme of letting go of people, or anyway, not being able to be with the people you love for whatever reason, it's one theme that connects the two films. It's just that it's played out really differently because we have Noriko, who's a grown woman, and we have Koch, which is 11.
9, I think.
9. God. Yes, so very different characters, very different environments. Another thing, well, but we touched upon that already at the beginning. It's the feel of the films. It's really similar, but that's because one of the main themes of Ozu is the daily actions and the importance of daily actions, but also because it draws from neorealism quite a bit, so that makes sense that like the peeling of the apple and the making of the tea and all the pillow shots and things like that are, I suppose, that can be considered superficial when then approached in the film from a hyper-coherent point of view, become absolutely crucial when using a different type of narrative structure, so either essentialist or borrowing from the neorealist tradition.
Yeah.
A special mention to my favorite bit ever, which is when she goes back to her biological family's house and there's crumbles on the table because their house is quite messy and shabby, and she kind of like sweeps them away. That was my favorite just bit in the entire film. Just this awareness of, this is not what I want. This is not me, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I love it. It's the moment in which you think, okay, she'll be alright, even if she's not gonna go back to Eileen and Sean.
It's a character changing experience.
It's the development of identity.
This concludes our episode on Cailín Ciúin. Join us next week when we will discuss Federico Fellini's 8.5 and Tom Gormican's The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, starring Nicolas Cage as Nick Cage. Please check out our website at themonochromepictureshow.com to see the show notes of this episode and my review of Cailín Ciúin.